right, with it being right at 6 o'clock, we'll get started here this evening. And Jolene, could you please take roll call?
Council members Erickson,
Here.
excuse me, Larson,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
Valento. Here. Mayor Roberts.
Here. If you're able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, Council, we have an agenda in front of us. Anyone willing to make a motion to approve?
Also move.
I'll second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
We have an agenda. Awards and presentations, none this evening. Open forum. This is something we have at every meeting. It gives any one of the public a couple minutes to speak about any city issue. Please state your name and address when you come forward, and limit it to around 3 minutes. All right, doesn't look like we have anyone this evening. We have a consent agenda in front of us. Anyone interested in making a motion on that?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull a couple items off the consent agenda for discussion. Item AI, or A number 1, maybe it's what it is, and G.
Okay. Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have our consent agenda. With that, we will move those items to the first part of our regular agenda. And so, Councilmember Miller, if you want to talk about some of your questions there on both the general invoices and then also G, Castlewood Management Agreement.
Mr. Mayor, just could I clarify that last motion?
I'm sorry.
Councilmember Miller, was that a motion to approve the consent agenda without those couple items? It was just a little,
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh,
and the seconder, was that clear to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, City Council members, I was looking through the general invoices and I came across a check number 118528 lease payment that we make to an annual lease to St. Peter's Catholic Church for some parking lot uses at Belts Park. As I looked at that, I was kind of curious and wondering why we pay St. Peter's that much money for a parking area when we have plenty, I believe, parking on the street that's very well marked and painted off both around the two sides of the park. And I just thought it was something that, I'm not sure when this was put into place, but maybe the Parks Committee could review that lease and review that parking to see if that's something we really need to be spending $5,500 on. And I guess I'm throwing it out for discussion with you guys.
go ahead, Council.
Yeah, I think it was just last year we approved that.
Okay,
And it was long, the conversation had been long in the works.
okay,
And the reality is that people park there in the St. Peter's parking lot. And so there was just a lot of back and forth between the city and the church over there. And we came to an agreement where we'd have a formal agreement that would allow people to park and use the tennis courts, basketball courts, and facilities. And there was an annual payment and some plowing of a sidewalk as a part of that.
so when I looked at it, it was hard for me to imagine people coming from that parking lot down to the park. There's really no walkway or sidewalk or path there. It looks to me like you have to go all the way down to the street, over and up the sidewalk. So again, I'm not sure if that's really a great access and
It's the one that was happening though.
Yeah.
It wasn't designed initially that way.
Right.
I think there's actually might be a better sidewalk there now with the redo of the basketball courts and tennis courts. There may or may not, I think there's a sidewalk along those courts now.
Yeah, I didn't notice, but it could have been there.
Yeah.
So any chance we should revisit it, or you think it's good the way it is?
So if I can weigh in, I would be open to maybe pushing that back to Parks Commission to see if unless they've already approved it and I missed that somewhere, if they've approved it for the second year, we When we made this decision, I was unaware of that we were going to have nice striped spots along South Shore there. And, you know, there is talk of a future potential parking lot in there, so maybe that we wouldn't need that. So I'm open either way to either approve this and have that conversation, or not approve it and come back and approve it after that conversation has been had with the Parks Commission.
I'd be fine pushing it to the Parks and Recreation Commission. When we voted on this, I thought the $5,500 was a little pricey for it being a parking lot sharing, especially with the street parking that we have now. But next to it, it's the church gets a neighbor of a park, and what better neighbor would you want than a park? So I'd be fine kicking it to the Parks and Recreation Commission, because I don't believe the Parks and Recreation Commission was in place when we approved this, correct?
That's correct, council member. The council reviewed and considered this contract in November of 2024, so a year ago, just about today, which is why you're seeing that annual invoice on your bills this week. But we did not have a Parks Commission seated at that time.
Mr. Mayor, if I might weigh in, it would be my suggestion, of course, you guys can do as you wish, but it'd be my suggestion to honor the contract and make the payment of this invoice. Certainly doesn't preclude us from having the discussion going forward, but I think withholding the payment here to discuss what happens next year is a bit, that doesn't operate in good faith, and I think I would suggest making the payment on this year's, and then certainly having that conversation going forward.
You couldn't, I suppose, so would you say then having that, doing it prorated would not be the best? If let's say that decision was made,
There's provisions in the contract for cancellation of the contract, a 60-day notice. And so, you know, after you went to the Parks Commission, and I know it's at the end of November, so we're up against that 60 days. And but I think just, you know, the invoice that's in front of you is for this summer, right? I mean, for all intents and purposes, which is over now that the pickleball courts are down. And so I think that would be that'd be my recommendation, that you make that.
so this is back in the rears, basically paying this.
I'm getting a head shake over there, so.
Mr. Mayor, can I just clarify? So when the contract was signed last year, it included an annual automatic renewal. But there is provisions within the contract language that does allow for termination upon 90 days notice. And it's very clear that there is a reimbursement provision for any prepaid rent for the year. So the $5,500, which is on your invoices tonight, pays for this November to next November. However, if the city were to wish to terminate, we follow the termination language in the contract, we could get reimbursement. I would assume that'd be prorated.
My mistake.
And then that I mean, I'm comfortable with that. You know, if we can have the Parks Commission, we'll honor this, have the Parks Commission have that conversation and their suggestion to us, and then we have the ability to get that money back if we decide not to move forward.
I just think it's prudent to review it.
So that we need a motion on this then, correct? On this position.
I would make a motion that we refer the lease with St. Peter's Catholic Church for the parking lot usage back to the Parks Commission for their review and their opinion to come back to us at council for approval.
I'll second.
Can I make a friendly amendment? I think we're looking for an approval of the city invoices, so approving item 7A with that condition.
I'm sorry, yes, approving the general invoices, item 7A with that provision.
I'll second.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, 7G out of the consent agenda, Castlewood Management Agreement, and I was looking to pull this as well, just for some public conversation about this, but go ahead, Councilmember Miller.
Yeah, exactly, Mr. Mayor and council members. That's really what I wanted to do myself is, again, not being real familiar with this particular golf course and how the city's been handling it. Looking at invoices and looking at profit and loss, I think there's some discussion that needs to happen around the golf course, and especially with the maintenance and the fees, and that's really why I wanted to pull it.
Mr. Mayor, I know Dave has some updated information on kind of where we're at for the year.
Just background for the Castlewood agreement, I don't know if you read through the agreement at all. We hired this, or we have this agreement with the management group, and we guarantee them basically $50,000 by the end of the year. If we're short of $50,000 profit, then the city would pay them, through it up to $50,000, and anything we're above $50,000, the city and the manager splits that profit. So when we initially started, the first 2 years, we paid them to true up to that $50,000. Last year, there was a profit of a little over $3,000 that was split. And at this point in time, through October, we're $26,000 positive. So it's trending year after year above. This is the first year that the simulators have been running all year long. They started halfway through one year when they didn't have any leagues. So this isn't even accounting for if they have fall simulator leagues as well. So I don't see us profiting much more between now and December just because they're not golfing anymore. But I think last year they lost about $6,000 between now and the end of the year just paying wages and utilities. But I would think we'd have probably a split profit around $20,000. Pretty much our only park and recreation thing that is actually making money for the city. So it's a quite good partnership. The only thing we have for expenses out there are electric utilities that run the well house. So the manager has to run the irrigation, but we pay for the power. So they're just responsible to irrigate, but we still pay for the power of the irrigation system. And we have a budget of, I believe, $5,000 just in operating maintenance if a culvert fails or we need to have a tree cut down or something like that. So we have budgeted $11,000 total in that fund on city expenses.
Dave, just a question. So in addition to that you mentioned with expenses, we have expenses when it comes to maintenance and repairs. So if there's a cost that exceeds certain amounts of money, whether it be equipment or whether it be other things like minor repairs, that cost is split between us and them, or we pay all that cost after it exceeds a certain amount of money. It sounds like they have to get approval over a certain amount of money. And
Correct.
then,
It would still show up in the P&L statement, but they just it's more to like equipment, like say if a mower breaks and they say it's gonna cost $10,000 to repair, the city wants to look at that piece of equipment and verify that it's worth repairing, otherwise buying new, but it would still go on their P&L statement and we won't split that cost. It just, we have to explain, or they have to ask our permission basically to spend those dollars. Just like on irrigation, if there's a valve that goes wrong or a controller box that's that expensive, we just are asking that they run it by us first before they make those bigger purchases.
but that would not affect our profit?
It would affect our profit.
Right, so if they spend $10,000, we would share in that cost, or it would be 10,000 off the total profit.
Correct.
So that 20 could be 10, as an example.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure of.
And yet,
No, go ahead.
The previous one was longer term. This is a 2-year contract, if I'm reading correctly. And when we met with the folks out there, I thought maybe they were talking about a 1-year based on potential retirement of the main interest in that business. Was there a reason, where do we land on 2 years?
Historically, they've always wanted like 3-year contracts, and the city's always come back with a 1-year, maybe a 2-year, because they wanted to see how this kind of flushed out. But they're the ones who kind of agreed to this 2-year. I know one of the owners of Foursome has been talking about retiring from his 9-to-5 job. I think their investment group, or the Foursome group itself, I haven't heard that. They have 3 or 4 other golf courses that they manage, so I haven't heard that they're planning on getting out of the game anytime soon. So I think they didn't raise any flags about a 2-year deal, so I won't have any concerns on it that way.
And then can you remind us of the number that we spent out there on some of the drainage issues this summer? Do you know that?
Yep,
Or ballpark?
that was a CIP project for about $80,000. It expanded 2 greens, fixed one or two tee boxes and then fixed a bunch of drainage issues, running a bunch of drain tile and just making some of the playable areas more playable. It was well needed. There was some holes that were always underwater. Even if you got a half-inch rain, they couldn't drive carts through it. So I think that was probably one of the first times we probably threw any money into that course for a lot of years, other than the clubhouse itself. But as far as the play area, it was.
And then in the park rec meeting, I was watching it, and they were talking about whether or not the irrigation, we do something next year or wait, or that's still, we'd have to decide that next year once we get things fired back up.
Yep, it's in the CIP for $900,000. That's the estimated cost to replace the entire irrigation system. The Parks Commission did not recommend that project go forward until an audit was done. So they directed staff to get a contractor out there to audit the entire system to see if, in fact, it is completely shot, or if some of it is salvageable, or there's ways that could be fixed more or less expensively. So once spring comes out and that irrigation is up and running, we will find a contractor to kind of do an evaluation on that, bring our findings back to the Parks Commission, and then get kind of what their thoughts are on that expense. It's an old system and it's still hand watering. So I mean, most of us go to bed and our irrigation happens overnight. Most golf courses, they're out during the middle of the day putting in quick connects, watering green. So it's technology, and the age of that is, you come to the decision of if you want a golf course with irrigation, at some point it's going to need to get done. But to answer your question, yes, it's in the books, but it's not planned yet until more evaluation's done.
I think, as we move forward on this, Castlewood is a great amendment to the city, one of our most used parks, but we're going to have to substantially invest some money into this park, and that's the Decisions Council. I mean, it is in the CIP, but some big dollars, $900,000 for irrigation is a big number to put into one park. Be interested to see what comes back with the Parks Commission, and appreciate their time on it. If the only thing I would like to see a little bit, and I brought this up to their attention when we went out there this summer, was that boulevard between the fenced area and 97 not being mowed on a regular basis. They mentioned it was because of the moisture and the amount of rain we received this summer, but even into the fall, when it did dry out, it just wasn't maintained or mowed like the rest of the golf course was. And then the other question would be, as you see that fence line, there's a lot of areas where that fence knocked down, and it's the old school fencing. Is there some thought about fixing that? And that would obviously be on us, on the city, or is that a shared cost, or?
Yeah, it'd be, and I said a couple years ago, we went through and fixed a lot of those panels or those posts. It's probably due for some more. It's getting to that point where the weed whip have taken those posts down to almost nothing. Probably to that point of either replacement, and we've had a couple incidents too of cars getting hit with golf balls, and a couple insurance claims that there may be a discussion point of putting up, a netting there or something off that last tee box as well, number 9. So another CIP project, but it's something as we develop our CIP next year to probably include that in, at least get costs on that. And I think Public Works for sure will at least fix the ones that are, have fallen out of the posts, and at least get not so horrid, but or it'll just fall over. So,
Other questions on this?
Yeah, I have a lot of questions, but, so I don't know this, so I'm going to ask the question. Can the city sell that golf course?
dedicated parkland, so it has to always stay a park.
But we could sell it to someone who would like to keep it as a golf course and always manage it as a golf course, so that takes us out of it? As long as it's
I'm
maintained?
gonna ask my legal
Yeah.
attorney that's sitting at the end there that knows these answers.
Your Honor, Counsel, the answer is, it depends. Because it would need to be for the benefit of the public, right? So there could be some limitations on being owned privately. We would have to look at what the deed currently says and what our pathway would be to get it into private ownership. It could be tricky.
The only reason I ask is when you look at $900,000 potentially and a number of miscellaneous costs. The golf course hasn't made the city a lot of money over the years, and it's not going to make money for many more years if we go and invest $1 million into it. Besides raising the fees for golf, there's got to be some other options. And I love the golf course, don't get me wrong, I golf there a lot.
I only smile because I asked that, I made that same comment to Forsum, and he asked me which of our parks makes any money.
Well, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm challenged with it at times as well. Does a municipality or city belong in the golf business? That's a good question. A lot of them, I know Mounds View over the years was into one and got out of it. It's a tough situation. We've got a great partnership here, I think, short term, but long term, all these questions need to be vetted out, and I agree with you. I'm challenged with some of the same questions or thoughts.
Yeah, and, obviously, we've had some opportunities out there when they rebuilt the clubhouse, they could have, potentially, we could look at, or we should have, maybe could have looked at, or maybe they did look at, is ways to use that clubhouse more than just for the, the golf simulators, and maybe you could have had weddings out there, maybe you could have had banquets out there, different things like that, that the city can make money on. I know a lot of public golf courses, that's how they make a little bit of money. And it doesn't look like we have that opportunity at all. Just food for thought.
Yep, well, it's good conversation to have. So any other questions on this particular item? Anyone just making a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve item 7G.
Motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll go back to our regular agenda item 8A, Meeting Refresh Project, Phase 2. Dave?
Mayor and Council, Phase 1 of the median project wrapped up this fall. Moving down the way on this satellite 35, Walgreens there in that intersection. Discussed even last year that it would be nice if we get these projects done in the spring. Full grow season, and we just kind of approved this way too late in the year that it just didn't line up that we had to do it in the fall. So the thought is getting these services, get the plans and specs done, and getting this out to bid in January, February, and get on the books for some contractor right away to be first project in the spring. That way it would be freshened up right away in the beginning of the year. We get to enjoy that first year right away. So that first step would be signing a backup with MWI, who did the professional services for the last one. In your packet or on the second page is his contract for services that would take care of him from right now all the way through the end of construction. That would handle putting the bid documents, putting out for bid, working with the selected contractor, and then being out there for inspections when the project happens, and then final closeout. Once we have the plans and specs, we'd come back hopefully ready in January, that first meeting or so, and approve plans and specs and authorize the project go out to bid, and then hopefully get that on the docket for spring. Reminder, if you don't remember, it's estimated the second project is about $300,000, 300 to 310,000. We're funded with $145,000 every year for the next 5 years for this project. So this would basically take our underage from this year and then 26 and 27 funding to pay for this one.
Question?
Does this include adding some concrete on one of the islands for safety for Public Works, changing the flags out?
Yep, there are multiple, kind of like the one you saw last year. It's every one of these planters gets shortened up with concrete. There's 3 in this one that'll get shortened up. It also involves redoing all the irrigation. All the irrigation probably froze when it was initially put in, so it accounts for redoing all the irrigation, all brand new trees. One discussion would be, we're assuming we will go forward with hydrangeas and rudbeckias, like we made that change in this last one. That's kind of ready, I thought, and planned into doing that plan change. We can always discuss that, but that's kind of the plan I was going to keep them consistent through.
I think it's important that the public realizes, you know, it looks like it might just be landscape, but we are shrinking down some of those spaces for less maintenance, more safety for public works staff, and then the irrigation thing. So that's where the majority of this cost is. It's not just in plants. And so that number gets to be a little bit large, but that really is just long-term, just to save on money and maintenance and look better, so. One interested in making a motion.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the professional services with MWI for the Medium Refresh Project, Phase 2 project in the amount of $39,296.
Second?
All right, we have motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we're at 8B, Forest Lake Cannabis Interim Use Permit. I've stated publicly a number of times, I have an ownership interest in a similar type business here in Forest Lake. And so like every other thing that's come forward since making that announcement, I have excused myself, and I will ask Councilmember Valento and Acting Mayor Valento to take this next item over.
And we will take a few seconds for Mayor Roberts to step out of the room. And have it be on the record that Mayor Roberts is out of the room. So with this, it looks like on the agenda it is Abby.
Yes, thank you, Acting Mayor Valento. Members of the council, tonight before you is an interim use permit from Budding Measured Movement LLC, otherwise going to be known as Forest Lake Cannabis. This is the third interim use permit of this nature. I think you've seen them fairly recently, so there's not much difference here, but we will run through it just like we have with all the others. Budding Measured Movement LLC is proposing to go at 1467 Lake Street South. It's a request for retail sales in the MU2 zoning district. That zoning district does allow for retail cannabis. Hours would be 8 to 8 a.m. Monday through Saturday, 11 to 6 on Sundays. It meets the standards for the MU2 zoning district in this multi-tenant space. As a reminder, an interim use permit is a temporary use permit. It doesn't run with the land forever. There is an expiration. And the reason we've zoned or using the interim use permit tool is that the city believes that there could be changes at the state level, and we want to be able to have that flexibility with these types of uses, that if there are statutory changes, that we aren't locked into some of our uses forever, and then we can reevaluate these as time goes on. Tonight, the action before you is to approve table or deny or table the IUP. So a quick review summary, departments reviewed this. The security plan was approved by a police department. Interior building permits will be required. When we look at the zoning requirements for this type of use, we do require all of these have odor mitigation, that they have future signage, will comply with the city standards. Something that is interesting with this application is this is the first application that has disclosed the type of license that they are seeking from the state. So Forest Lake Cannabis has informed us they will be seeking a micro business license. And in the city, we do not allow for micro businesses within 250 feet of residential properties. What's interesting is when we established our zoning code, legal counsel and staff really looked at trying to make sure our zoning ordinance talked about use. All of our zoning districts indicate what types of cannabis uses are allowed: retail, cultivation, manufacturing, and identified those uses appropriate in the districts. However, we have this one clause in the code that does indicate micro businesses are not allowed within residential. And Amanda might be able to speak a little better. It's been over a year now that we drafted this, but I do believe when we drafted this, we did that because we knew that micro businesses, along with some of the other types of licenses, had more intense uses associated with them. So while you can have a retail endorsement with a micro business or a meso business, you can also have cultivation and manufacturing and or distribution. maybe microbusiness doesn't allow for distribution, but some of these higher intensity uses, we didn't believe were appropriate next to residential uses within the zoning code. So that is one area that we've identified as being a challenge in the application of our new zoning ordinance, because we don't believe the intent was to prohibit retail next to residential necessarily. If the license type that they were applying for was retail, the buffer requirement wouldn't apply. So what's before you tonight is the discussion on the findings and consideration. The operations are compatible with the surrounding uses. There's no negative impacts on traffic, utilities, property values. It's consistent with the 2040 comp plan, and it meets the zoning intent for retail cannabis uses. Tonight before you for consideration is conditional approval of resolution 1124-2502. This authorizes retail-only cannabis operations. The IUP strictly states cultivation, manufacturing, processing, extraction, packaging, or other cannabis production activities would not be prohibited. Furthermore, in the staff report that was presented to you before the meeting, staff is seeking your direction. We did bring this matter to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission also recommends approval of this, but also with the recommendation, this council directs staff to change the ordinance that references state licenses, microbusiness, mesobusiness, the distribution, the transporter, and change that to a buffer requirement for the types of uses next to residential, as we believe the ordinance was intended to be. Tonight, representatives from Forest Lake Cannabis are here. If you have any questions for them, it's not a public hearing, but they are available if you do have questions of them. Are there questions from me? And I will say, I do know that one was raised by Councilmember Larson earlier today, and I said I would address it. The question came up of whether or not we should be tabling consideration of this until a new ordinance is amended or an ordinance is approved. We do have time. Our 60-day timeline with an extension isn't up until the early part of February for consideration of this. We could have an ordinance amendment back before the Planning Commission at their first meeting in January, which would then put this potentially on your second meeting in January. The only risk that we maybe run is if there's tweaks to an ordinance on a Planning Commission level and they're not quite ready to bring that forward to you. The one thing that I will say, the risk that we run in tabling the request is that, or I can't say a risk that we run, tonight all you're considering is the use permit. So this is a multi-step licensing process through the state. The state has given them pre-approval. They come to us to get their zoning approvals, building permits, they build out their site, they come back to the city for their local registration. That would be the time that we would have to determine, again, that they're in compliance with their IUP and the zoning code. And by that time, we would have had that opportunity to change the code. All of that needs to happen before their state license is issued. That answer at least the question that I think Councilmember Larson was just about to ask me.
Good job, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
I have one question. I noticed in the building department review that they said that the restrooms noted on the plan as employee only are required to be accessible to the public. Is there any clarity as far as how they'll meet that condition? As you look at the map in the packet, looks like the restrooms are in the far back, opposite end of the building as the customer area. And I imagine that there's going to be high security to get back to those restrooms.
Yeah, they have not at this time, but building permits have not been submitted. So those plans that you took a look at were preliminary plans and can always get changed before the building permit is issued.
Madam Mayor and council members and Abby, my question, I guess I have two of them. When you talk about microbreweries or micro businesses, does that include like microbreweries and different things like that, or is it just for this cannabis type?
It's just for this cannabis type. So the state has certain different types of licenses which allow for different kinds of aspects of the cannabis-based business.
Okay, and at some of our recent meetings regarding this, we had talked about limiting the amount of licenses or limiting issue of licenses in our state
Yep.
or in our city. Would this then be the last one that we could issue based on what we talked about, if I remember right? Or did we not do the limiting? I'm trying to remember, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we did limit the total number of local registrations in the city to one more than the state requirements. So the state requires us to have 2, one more is 3. So while this is the third interim use permit that you're considering, again, what we're limiting is the retail registration. It does bring up a really great discussion point that the council may want to talk about, or we certainly would be discussing at the time of an ordinance amendment, of whether or not the policy would be we would not allow for more interim use permits than local registrations to try to keep them in track. Legal counsel may need to weigh in on that one. But I will say, from a city's zoning standpoint, we could take in right now 100 IUPs, and none of them may materialize in an actual registration. And so I don't know that there's a better way to do it, but from an administration on a zoning perspective only, we would love it if as many IUPs as we could consider are the ones that would be permitted to have the registrations in the community. That answer your question, Councilmember Miller?
It did. Would legal like to weigh in?
Thank you, Your Honor, Counsel. So, as Abby mentioned, technically somebody could come in and apply for an IUP, even though hypothetically there are 3 IUPs that have, or 2 that have already been approved, potentially a third tonight. If all 3 of those individual businesses applied for the registration and received the registration, there would be no more available registrations because we're capped at 3. So we could certainly do a code amendment that would say IUPs are, some sort of language that this is only available if there's also registrations available. It may be a solution without a problem, because it may be that when somebody calls and says, hi, I'd like to get an IUP, and we say, well, we're full, registrations are full, you could get an IUP, spend a bunch of money, but you won't be able to open a shop here. It may just stop the inquiry right there. But if it seems like it's something that Abby wants a little bit more teeth in the code, that's definitely something that we could talk about doing.
Yep, it does. Thank you, which I agree we probably need to address. And then one last question. I don't necessarily agree or disagree with the statement that no negative impact on property values, but I do have a concern about the 250-foot buffer in that residential area around it. And I guess, planning looked at it and they didn't seem to have too much concern with it, but it seems we have those rules for a reason. And being that close to residential, and if it was in a school area, that could be a negative, or it could be a problem as well. There are other locations along 61 where I think they could do the same thing that maybe would work even better, because they wouldn't have that buffer ruling that would affect them. So that's just a concern of mine in that particular location.
Well, Councilmember Miller, reference the Planning Commission, they did share a concern with the residential mobile home park and things like that. They were surprised that the gentleman that manages that did not come to the meeting, but I believe he shared some concerns. Whether he could make the meeting or not, I don't know. But they did have concerns about that, and they also had concerns about availability of parking spaces, since it's a multi-business complex. So they were inquiring, is it more like a business where you would run in, pick up your order and leave, or are you shopping around, or what? So that's some of the things that they kind of brought up, which was kind of worked through the evening with Abby on that.
Can I state just for the record, Counselor, I think the staff does believe that 250-foot buffer was intended for those higher intensity uses. But I do think that there is still an argument to be made that retail may be directly next to residential. when it's directly adjacent to or touching bordering, that there could be some cause for concern. You know, the intent of zoning is to separate land uses. We indicated that this type of retail use was allowed anywhere that retail was allowed. And I think that this is a great question to be raised and discussed by the council of whether or not this specific type of retail right next to residential is appropriate. I think that a 250-foot buffer would limit a lot of properties. And if the other two IUPs we've issued were also seeking micro business licenses, because we won't know until the time of registration unless they disclose it to us up front, then we would not be able to issue registrations to the two other IUPs already permitted as well, because they are also within 250 feet of residential.
And then maybe the potential business owners, if they're here, could elaborate a little bit. I noticed there's a very complicated and very nice air system that's being put in there, a ventilation system. Is that because I don't know much about dispensaries. Can you smoke right on site? And if that's the case, is that being vented up and out? Or what is that ventilation system for? I don't know.
Sure. Retail licenses do not allow for on-site consumption. There is some provisions in the code allowing for sampling, or in the state licensure for sampling. Those would need to occur indoors. They wouldn't be able to occur outside in public property.
So when you say sampling, if that ventilation, is it smoking type stuff? Or is it just edibles?
I would assume that a retail cannabis shop would have both.
So if it's smoking type stuff and you have a ventilation system taking that out of the building and out into the air, that's what concerns me about being by those residential areas.
Quite understandable, and the smell in general is something that regardless of the type of use, that we did address with the cannabis ordinance, in that we do not want to have any outside odor detected for any of our cannabis-based businesses. Hence why they're putting in these air filtration systems that's essentially putting out fresh air back out to not push those smells out. That makes sense.
Okay, then one last question is, how is it monitored then? If it's not filtering that smell, or maybe not necessarily addictive, but that odor out into the public, how do you correct that?
Well, we can determine it to be a violation of their IUP, a violation of city code, and we would start an administrative citation or administrative code enforcement process to first would give them a nice pretty please letter, say, pretty please get this done by this date. And if they don't, then we start with citations.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome.
One follow-up question, the registration limit that we put on for 3, is that, or 1 plus the minimum required, is that just for retail, or is that for any related cannabis businesses?
Just for retail.
Just for retail.
Yep. Great questions.
Any other questions?
Madam City Attorney, I noticed on your findings of fact, or your review of this with the Office of Cannabis Management, it's unclear on how they will interpret such situations as they viewed the micro business licenses authorizing all activities allowed by the state. For this reason, if they do get approval for their for micro business or meso business, and they go outside, they say they're not going to use or grow, and all of a sudden something happens, then it's not going to be, they're going to say, you allowed them to come in. What protections do we have other than our IUP? If you may.
Your Honor, Counsel, so I believe you're referencing the fact that the micro business is allowed to do growing, manufacturing, and selling. A retail license can only sell. So, but what we've discovered, and I just want a quick step back for 1 second. When we first did all of these ordinances, what we did not know at the time, or did not realize, was that because of the caps on the retail licenses, and the fact that there is no caps on the micro businesses in terms of, if you recall, the social equity applicant versus a regular applicant kind of a situation, the vast majority of people who fully intend to just operate a retail establishment went and got a micro, or are applying for a micro business license instead of a retail license. But the intent is to use it as a retail shop. That was not something that we understood when we were building our ordinances, nor was that something we considered, which is why the dimensional distance requirement of the 250 feet talks about these micro businesses and meso businesses, cultivators, manufacturers, because the thought was, if you can do the super intense, uses, that's not supposed to be by residential. So we have a little bit of a mismatch with how the licenses are actually being issued. I have reached out to the Office of Cannabis Management and received no response. So unfortunately, I can't say for certain what they would do. But my concern is that if we have approved a micro business license and our IUP says you can only do retail, we understand that the license says you get to do all these things, but we are saying your IUP, your interim use permit, says you get to sell cannabis. You do not get to grow it. You do not get to manufacture it. And then the business says, great, okay, we're going to sell. And a year from now, or 2 years from now, whenever that might be, they start manufacturing on site, or they start growing on site. And we say, you're in violation of the IUP. We're going to potentially revoke your IUP, and we're going to revoke your registration. Our authority under the statute to revoke a registration, we don't have any. We are allowed to suspend a registration for up to 30 days. And we must notify OCM that we've suspended a registration, and we must give the reason why. So in the scenario that hypothetical example that I'm providing, we would say they're doing more than we are giving them permission to do. What I don't know is what OCM's response to that is going to be, because we can only suspend for 30 days, and then OCM is responsible to make a final decision. And it is possible, it is in the realm of possibility, that their reaction would be, well, you approved them with their license. It's a micro business. A micro business lets them do all of these things. You need to let them do all of those things. Or they could say, we respect your zoning authority, city, and we understand that they're not allowed to do more than selling product, even though they have a license that would allow them to do more than sell product. And so, yes, we agree the registration is revoked. Carry on. I have no way of knowing what they're going to do. And unfortunately, all interactions with OCM to date have not, I can't say, based on what we've experienced, it seems likely they'll head in this direction. It's kind of the Wild West still on that.
Madam Mayor and council members, I think we might want to consider, based on our earlier discussion, tabling this to get our ordinance and some of that stuff in better order before we approve this, would be my recommendation.
I'm going to ask, I know the young lady out in the audience was the spokesperson on behalf at the Planning Commission meeting. Would you mind stepping up to the podium, please, if you don't mind? Just state your name. And thank you.
My name is Jamie White, address as well.
Please.
Yeah, I live at 5054 93rd Avenue North in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, zip code 55443, and I am Mr. Kressler's consultant. He does send his apologies. He wanted to be here tonight, but he has two daughters. One is 3 and one is 4 months, and he got called into dad duty, so he does apologize. I do have a prepared statement that I'd like to read, and then I will be more than happy to answer your concerns from the knowledge that I have being on the other side of the room. So, Budding Measured Movement LLC does seek an interim use permit to operate a cannabis retail use at 1467 Lake Street South. within an existing multi-tenant retail building in the general mixed-use district. The company is owned by Mr. Jeff Kressler, a Minnesota-raised recent father of two who has long aspired to responsibly operate his own cannabis retail business that is compliant, secure, and community-minded. The proposed operation is retail sales only within an approximately 2,100 square foot tenant space. No cultivation, manufacturing, processing, or production activities are proposed or will occur on site. That the use aligns with the city's framework for cannabis retail in the MU2 of an IUP, and this site plan involves only minor interior improvements. Exterior conditions will remain unchanged. The applicant has been pre-approved by the State Office of Cannabis Management for a micro business license. The multi-tenant plaza provides shared customer parking and separate rear employee parking. No adverse parking impacts are expected on our end. The applicant will observe retail hours compliant with city standards, Monday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Sunday, 11 to 6. Deliveries will be managed discreetly and in accordance with state and local rules. A comprehensive security plan has been reviewed by the police chief, who reported no operational security concerns. Odor will be managed through enhanced HVAC filtration systems to ensure no detectable odor at the property line or adjacent tenant spaces. The applicant accepts city review of odor controls as a condition of approval and will implement improvements if needed. No exterior site work is proposed as stated. The applicant will obtain all required building, plumbing, mechanical, electrical, fire, signage, and any SAC or other determinations or permits prior to occupancy and operation. The watershed and public works reviews identified no issues for interior-only project. Given the applicant's retail-only commitment and willingness to accept strict conditions, that prohibit any non-retail use of the micro business license at this site, we respectfully request that the Council recommend approval of our IUP subject to standard cannabis retail conditions that include retail-only operations, ongoing compliance with state licensure and city registration, police-approved security, odor control meeting city standards, adherence to hours, signage review, and all permitting. Annual review/renewal of mechanisms typical of cannabis IUPs. This approach advances the city's policies goals for safe, orderly retail while honoring the applicant's state licensing status. Now, I would like to say I've heard your concerns concerning the micro business license with the ability to grow, cultivate, anything like that. And there has been a lot of misunderstanding on what we can actually do. Our license allows us to apply for those uses. It is not an automatic availability. We can't apply for a retail use within a city, get approved, and then begin to grow a year later. We would have to write an entire plan of record for that. We would have to go through a city process again and receive local approval before the state would even look at our plan and come and inspect for a grow operation. So that is not something that you can just do. It is something that you still have to follow the state's process and receive approval. Even on the retail side, like you were saying, our bathrooms are a concern. Those are very preliminary because we have a lease, but we have not even taken over the space entirely yet, being that we have not received local approval. And after we would receive local approval, if that's something that we're capable of doing, the state would have to come out and we would have to comply with everything, as well as they'd look over our permits and make sure that we're compliant on a city and a state level. I know a lot of people are very concerned with what the state is not communicating, and that is why we try our very best to communicate with the councils for what is not being informed, so that we can help you guys understand that we want to partner with your communities and be a compliant business, not, oh, the state says this, you have to do it. That's definitely not our intention. And Mr. Kressler just wants to be a nice family man, provide money for his daughters, and, be a part of a community.
So I guess a quick question would be, so you're stretching it to go to that micro business thing, why not just have a retail store? Under the licensing, just a retail license versus going to the micro.
As your attorney stated, not a lot of retail licenses were available. It was very, very slim.
So you stepped up a little bit. You stepped up then to the next.
To the micro business, yes, because it does allow for retail use, which is definitely what Mr. Kressler wanted. He just wants to run a retail operation. But being that there were not a lot of retail-only licenses available, that made it very hard to get into the application pool as a whole. And many different cities ran a few different ways to even accept retail licenses. A lot of cities have put strict standards on retail or strict standards on micro. So he saw this as his way to have at least a little bit more option for what he wanted to do without putting him in I can only do this pool.
Okay. I see the gentleman, he was at the planning commission, he's your counsel, I believe,
Yes.
correct? I guess the thing that I kind of struggle with, and I think a lot of us are sharing the same thing, is we're just a little concerned. I know you stated that you don't plan on doing any type of cultivation or anything like that, but if we get the business in there and something happens, we're concerned about the Office of Cannabis Management saying, well, you already let them in there under your agreement or whatever. I think we're kind of struggling a little bit in that line with things.
And like I stated, we would have to completely apply for new plans. We would have to write an entire narrative. The OCM refers to them as a plan of record. I would have to go back to the state and apply entirely for that type of licensure. And then we would once again have to come in front of a planning commission meeting and say, hey, we've been in this space as retail use for a year or 2 years, whatever it may be, and we'd like to grow there. And you and your commission can say no. And we have to go, okay. And that would make us have to find another location that we'd want to grow out of. And that would make us take an entirely different turn. But you cannot just switch your type of license that you have in a spot and just say, we're doing this now. We'd have to follow the state ruling. They would push it back to the city, and we would have to do this process all over again.
I think we just share a little bit of, I don't know, protection with our interim use permit too. So I think that is that. But I know we do share a little bit of concern with the possibility of grow or whatever going on. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Council, Abby, maybe you could weigh in again. You had mentioned because of this license application, we should really revisit some of our interim use ordinances and things like that, and maybe make some changes. If we don't do that before we approve this, does that affect this in the future, or are they under the old rules then, or do we have to do something in advance before we'd approve this?
The interim use permit is memorializing the use, and the use is retail. At the time of the local cannabis registration, if our ordinance has not changed, we lawfully cannot approve their local registration.
Have to change that first.
We would have to change that first. The other thing I'm hearing is just that concern over what happens if they change their type of uses in the building and OCM's allowance for a local enforcement. Interim use permits are designed to be temporary, and the reason we wanted them to be temporary is because we wanted to make sure that the state was done tinkering with the rules, and that if they were going to tinker with the rules, as those IUPs come back up for renewal, we'd have the opportunity to reevaluate that use with the state regulations and or regulations in effect. At the time that we looked at our first IUP, the Planning Commission was really concerned for offering an IUP greater than 3 years, and really wanted to have a 1-year IUP. And staff said, hey, these are pretty big investments. We should be allowing a little bit more time. The Planning Commission made the recommendation in the first application for a 3-year IUP, and the council opted to go with 5, recognizing that each business has some pretty significant investment, and to allow them to have some assurances that their business wasn't going to have to change within the first 5 years. Another opportunity with the IUP is setting that end specific timeline. Right now, the resolution before you is consistent with the other IUPs, that it is 5 years. You could also have that opportunity tonight to not grant it for as much time as the other ones in the past, recognizing that there could be greater limitations in the future. I do believe we should be changing that ordinance as soon as we can, if we would still like to allow for retail uses near residential, teasing that apart from that micro business license, the buffer from the license. That is something I would recommend that we do regardless of what we do with any other sections of the code.
Again, I had made a motion earlier to table this, to have further discussion about it.
Without changing it right away or not?
If I'm hearing you correctly, Abby, if we were to approve this IUP as staff has recommended, and we move forward with modifying the policies, the ordinance, anything that we approve tonight, correct me if I'm wrong, would fall under the updated ordinance, correct?
Their use would stand, it's at the time of their local registration is when we'd be reevaluating for its final conformity with the code. Ideally, what we would do is we would take out that reference to the micro business license with the buffer distance from the residential uses. And we would say, hey, we want to have some buffers from residential uses, specifically these types of uses, cultivation, manufacturing, and really removing the word micro business from the city code.
Approving this IUP doesn't lock us into anything because we're still going to go through the registration process.
Correct. As so long as we would, one, change the code. What it would do is it would give them a false hope tonight. And if we didn't change the code, they make their investments and come back through local registration, then we'd be denying it at that point. And I don't think that that's necessarily fair to the applicant. I hear Commissioner Miller say he made a motion. I didn't quite hear the motion, but I heard he say making a motion. Knowing that legal counsel has reached out to OCM and to see if we can get an OCM legal opinion on this matter, I don't think that there is not harm in waiting another 30 days or 60 days up to our state statutory maximum 120 days with their extension to see if we can't get that legal opinion and also help give us some legroom, some time to get an ordinance working through the city's planning commission and back to you.
Acceptable?
So Abby, are you asking me to withdraw my motion?
I didn't really hear.
I'm sorry.
motion.
So I had made a motion, I thought, to table this discussion until we had a chance to hear back from legal and look at revising the ordinance.
Councilmember Miller, if I
Yes.
may, Madam
Sorry.
Mayor. My recollection is that you recommended we discuss, but I don't
Oh,
believe that you made a
okay.
formal motion yet.
Okay. Was that a formal motion or?
If you could be very
Okay.
clear in what your intention is.
My motion to table would be in regards to hearing back from legal with what they hear, as well as reviewing our ordinance and looking at changing some of the language with the buffer zone in our ordinance before we finalize this. I think there's no need to rush. I'm very pro-business. I want to help everybody in the business, in the community, do as much things as they can in our city, but I also want to get it right, and I don't want to deal with maybe things that change at the state, and then we've locked ourselves into something that we can't maybe change.
Yep.
My opinion would be just to hold out a little bit.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
I would second that.
Any discussion?
Can I ask for a point of clarification? So you had said the couple things the reasons for tabling are hearing from legal and OCM, review the ordinance, and change the buffer. Staff would just maybe be seeking some direction on that buffer. There was some discussion about the 250 feet from residential, but then there was also some early conversation about this particular retail shop right next to residential. And I would really like to know if the council has an opinion of whether or not you would like to have an increased retail distance from residential. or at a buffer distance from residential.
We're
Good question.
talking about two things, I think. One is a buffer by just straight line, but also adjoining properties is a secondary thing.
Well, the first was 250 feet was the micro business, but staff didn't believe the intent was for retail. So do you still believe a 250 feet from retail to residential is appropriate? And then if you are favorable to seeing retail closer than that, are you as comfortable as a directly adjacent property
How far is this building to residential?
right next door?
So, so our, we really don't have a buffer for retail, is what you're
Not
saying?
really, no.
Got it.
I think the other sites that are currently issued an IUP as well are,
They're about 150 to 300 feet, or to 150 to 250. That one right downtown is very close to, I forget the name of the condo building to the south.
Lighthouse Lofts.
Yeah, and then the other at Lakes Floral is, with our purely residential properties, about 150 feet away. But there is some potential long-term residential in an old strip motel, very, very close. And so none of them are directly adjacent to those residential uses. But this is not the only business that could be affected if the other two IUPs were also intending for a micro business license.
Councilmember Miller, were you concerned about the not having a buffer for retail, or was it just a concern about well, for residential, but the other aspects of the micro business?
Mainly the micro business. There's plenty of retail in town that residential's right there. So it wasn't necessarily that, it was more of the micro business.
Other types of uses, the cultivation, the manufacturing.
Correct.
I'm hearing, at least from Commissioner Miller, that the 250 feet from those higher intensity uses, what staff believes was the intent of the ordinance, is still something you'd like us to pursue, but there was less concern with the retail cannabis next to residential.
For me, that would be yes.
But I'm just, okay. And I see a lot of shaking heads that you'd agree with that,
Yes.
what Commissioner Miller stated. Okay. I appreciate that opportunity to just have a little bit of discussion so that staff has direction coming back, and direction maybe moving forward to the Planning Commission before coming back before you, so.
Okay, there was a motion, there was a second, there was a point of clarification. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the IUP has been approved.
No, that was tabled.
Or tabled, sorry.
Thank you.
Tabled, with all the clarifications. So with that, we will bring Mayor Roberts back into the room and then move on to item C.
We have a question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, we are at item AC, resolution regarding the Med Council statement, and Abby.
Thank you, Mayor Roberts. Members of the council, at your workshop last week, I brought forth to you the 2040 system statement. So as a reminder, the Met Council has this every 10-year planning process. When throughout the process, they end up issuing us their system statement, and that system statement is the document that says, hey, Forest Lake, here's how you need to, here's some things you need to consider and put into your comp plan to make sure your comp plan aligns with the Imagine 2040 plan. So there were 3 areas that the council and staff talked about at the last meeting. One was the city's community classification as suburban edge. As a reminder, the Met Council is proposing to change our density requirement from 3 units per acre to 3.5 units per acre. So I have discussed all of these things with Met Council staff. And one of the things that Met Council staff has said is, if you don't like 3.5 units per acre, what would you change in the, you have to have a specific thing. And staff's specific amendment request that I'm proposing is not that we would change our number necessarily, though we'd like that number to be reduced down. It is the lowest in the urban service area density. So what I'm asking the council to consider in the resolution is to ask the Met Council to memorialize the density flexibilities that the Met Council said that they would end up having for cities in trying to have for cities to be able to achieve these densities. I'm really struggling with my words. So what staff is specifically outlining in the exhibit is that we would request that the Met Council look to memorialize land areas for storm ponds, be that they're in outlot or easement, and then also their maintenance access needs. Additionally, land areas required for reasonably sized roadways. The second thing that staff is asking the Met Council to amend is the forecasted households. So right now they are proposing by 2030 that we would be capped at 9,300 housing units, and staff is proposing those to go to 9,750. It's a small increase, but I do believe that that is sufficient enough to get us to 2030. When you look at the housing starts that we had within the first 3 years, we were averaging 160 a year. I'm not sure where those housing units went, but I do think we had some apartment complex that really bumped those numbers up really quickly. If we kept on that 160 unit per year, we would hit the 9,300 before the adoption of this plan. Met Council staff has stated they have administrative abilities to change these, but I do believe that we should still be including them in the resolution as an objection. And then lastly, the resolution also objects to the affordable housing calculation, not just our total number, 600 units, but also the allocation or the bands of affordability. As a reminder, most of the units that they're stating the city would need to produce are within the 30 to 50% AMI, the like kind of deeply affordable housing. I do include in my staff report some analysis of how those numbers get developed. And in talking with the Met Council staff, these are very much a math equation. They take our future households and they take our future households and the total developable land area in the metro, and they say, okay, city A, B, C, D, here's your number. They just slightly, our number did get adjusted down slightly to 600. They've also just asked us not necessarily that we meet this requirement in the next 10 years, but that we just show that we're guiding the land area for that. So when you look at our land guidance area, staff is very confident that we're going to be able to guide the acreage to show that we have land sufficient to accommodate the affordable housing calculation assigned to the city of Forest Lake. Staff in the resolution still states the objection to the affordable housing allocation, but does not request a change. Specifically, if our forecasted households go up, our allocation number goes up. So I say, hey, while you're considering our forecasted households to go up, let's not change those affordable housing allocations. I don't know that that will be the circumstance. So tonight before you is a resolution 1124-2506. It was slightly amended from the packet. There's one on the dais before you, because not only does it object to those three things, but it does request a hearing with the Met Council's Land Use Advisory Committee. The resolution that was before you in the packet said the advisory committee or an administrative law judge. In consultation with our legal counsel, we believe it would be better suited in front of the Land Use Advisory Committee. If the council approves this tonight, I'll send it over to the Met Council this evening. Today is the last day we could submit this and request a hearing. There is always the opportunity for staff and the Met Council to work out these issues before going to a hearing. But this definitely puts them on notice that we want to advocate for ourselves in these ways, and we're willing to have that hearing. If the council approves this tonight, that hearing would be scheduled within 60 days. So with just the turn of, after the new year, I'd imagine we'd be having that hearing, and within 30 days after that, be going back to the formal Met Council for their consideration of amendments. Any questions?
I feel like I'm talking a lot tonight, Mayor.
That's fine.
Mr. Mayor, council members. Abby, could you remind me again, was there some sort of penalty that the Met Council can levy against the city or put against the city if we don't hit those numbers?
Not with our affordable housing allocations, but with our housing density, yes. Met Council is our sewer authority, and if our developments aren't in line with the densities called for in the comp plan, and we are not keeping up with the minimum density requirement of our community classification, the Met Council can reject connections to the sewer system.
So increasing that number might not, even though we feel confident we'll hit those numbers, might not be in our benefit.
The housing forecasts aren't something we have to hit. I
Oh,
should have said that.
that's what I'm asking you.
I should have said that. Our density requirements, how many units per acre
Okay,
on each individual piece of property in each future land use in the city. So
okay.
those we have to hit, the forecasts we don't have to hit, the future allocations we don't have.
Okay.
In fact, the the forecasts could change even, just as they said, they're willing to administratively change those even in a year from now. If all of a sudden we got a boom or things just slam to a halt, those are ways that they administratively can improve that. So those are conversations we'll be having over the next probably couple weeks with the Met Council before the hearing to see if we can get those forecasted numbers bumped up a little bit higher. The last thing we want, though, is our forecast number being at 9,300. And if interest rates turn around, if a few of these plats that we've been in conversations with, one piece of property sells, those numbers could really we could exceed that pretty significantly. We can't exceed our forecasted numbers without going through a Met Council comp plan amendment. So that's the fear, is that I'd want to start a little higher if we could. Also looking just at what it seems like we could do for growth over this first 10-year period.
Thank you.
Questions?
I just have one comment. On the Exhibit A, the second paragraph, 7 lines down, so the sentence says, as a result, we are building neighborhoods with lots with small front and rear yards. Is that the correct language?
No. It should be yards. Thank you
Okay.
very much for pointing that out.
That's the only thing I have.
Interested in making motion. I appreciate staff's work on this. This is very important.
Yeah, thank you for crafting this.
And this puts them on notice, and we want to be good partners, but these three things here are very important for us to point out when moving forward in this new comp plan.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 1124-0506, a resolution objecting the Metropolitan Council's Imagine 2050 City of Forest Lake System Statement and requesting a hearing.
There's
Second.
motion, a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, 8D franchise fees, and Mark.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Council, this item is in front of you again simply because we erroneously left out a corresponding franchise fee for Connexus Energy territory. So the city is served by two different power companies when it comes to electricity. So we have an Excel territory and a Connexus Energy territory. If we're gonna add franchise fees or change the franchise fees, I should say, on one of those utilities, we have to do it for the other one as well. We certainly intended to do that. We simply missed having that resolution in front of you to add Connexus in. So we're gonna bring that one back by itself, and in reviewing that, just noticed a few typos that needed to be corrected. So a few references to the past ordinances that we're amending. And so in the end, it just seemed easier to redo the whole package. And so what's important to note here is that these the ordinances we passed did not become law because we did not publish them. So we recognized the issue before we published them, and then if you don't publish them, they don't go into law. And so we did not publish them. You're gonna then, if you would pass these tonight, you would kind of just approve all of those 3 ordinances. So there's Connexus Electricity, Excel Electricity, and Excel Gas are the 3 franchises that we would be.
Questions, comments?
I just had a question before the meeting to say what changed, because you look through it and it's almost identical, but thank you for explaining that. So I'll move to rescind the November 10th, 2025 approval of ordinances 760 and 761, and then further move to approve ordinances 760, 61, and 763, as well as to approve resolution 11240504, a summary publication.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Right, we move to our discussion portion of the meeting. These are discussion items. No formal decisions will be made on these 2 items. And the first thing is the 2026 budget proposal.
And Mr. Mayor and Council, we, at the last workshop, we had some discussion about trying to find a spot to land for the final levy and budget. As you know, we have a preliminary levy increase of 12.59% that was approved back in September, and that's what the truth and taxation notices that went out to the public was based on. Since then, we've had numerous discussions with the council on ways to lower that number, and at the last meeting, we sort of presented this 9.25 scenario in your packet, and then by the time the workshop rolled around, we had an option for an 8.9% increase, and fairly immediately after that workshop, I received some feedback from from various members of the council on different ways they saw that we could lower the levy as well. And so I wanted to coalesce all that into one document here, and Ellie's done a nice job of sort of graphically doing that in front of you. You have a little cheat sheet here that shows you the various budget scenarios. Again, all of those are sort of up for debate. But sort of the question in front of you tonight is, what do we want to have in terms of options available to us at the Truth and Taxation hearing or immediately thereafter for final budget adoption? Do we want to simply have the 12.59 option and one of these other options, or do we want to have all 3 prepared? We have various resolutions and things that need to be prepared to pass that night is the intent. So we want to have some clarity on where we're headed, and if these scenarios make any sense to you as well. I could just run through the differences again. 12.59 is sort of the all-in, everything that was on the initial list from our 10-year plan, all the staffing plans. And so that included the 4 police employees, a patrol sergeant, 2 patrol officers, and a police administrative assistant, and then a public works maintenance operator and a deputy fire chief. The 9.25% plan eliminated the police sergeant, and also then took advantage of the increase in franchise fees to lower the levy, as opposed to just adding to the amount we put into the capital fund of the streets. 8.9% plan just simply delayed the hire of those remaining 5 staff positions to February 1st. So a small change, but a small reduction in the budget from 9.25 to 8.9. And then finally, the 7.9% option here has some use of what we are anticipating will be surplus funds from the 2025 budget. We had a number of staff vacancies for a number of months. So we feel like there's enough funds there to have a small, what we would call rollback of the capital equipment fund. So we would sort of reduce the amount we're putting into that capital fund, but then use surplus funds to re-inject that money into the fund to kind of square things up and not actually reduce the amount of things that we're buying, but it would just be a swap of those offsets to the general fund levy. So with all of those things deducted, the levy increase would be at 7.9% if we took advantage of all those opportunities. Obviously, each one, the opportunities, quote unquote, comes with a consequence. And as you can see, the various options there are sort of laid out for you. So wanted to have just a little bit of discussion, take advantage of tonight's forum to be able to give us any further direction.
The one thing that maybe was a part of this conversation that got us down to the 9.25 was there was new revenue for public work or for police, right?
Yeah, and we didn't include that in this chart because it's something, it wasn't a cost-cutting measure more than just a
Windfall.
a revelation that we were gonna have, a windfall of about $100,000 or so. Based on some conservative budgeting we had done a while back with some assumptions based on feedback we'd gotten from the state. The state kind of finally came out with their numbers and it was much better than they had been telling us. And so that was kind of a no-brainer.
Just a question, in here, the Public Works Maintenance Operator is the same on this second budget alternatives as the Public Works Parks person, is that correct?
Yes, correct. That's fixing the terms there, but yes, the Public Works Maintenance Operator is the one that the new hire that would be for doing primarily parks and work. It would be in with the rest of so the Public Works Department is sort of divided into two. We have utilities and streets and parks. We have a separate parks division at this point in time, but so I think the intent, of course, with that position is to offset some of the additional hours we've been seeing in our parks. And I know Dave has some information on that. If you would like him to share some of that, we can certainly do that. That hire has, has been thought through in terms of how much the number of hours that we're putting into parks. That our folks take good care to track that time. And we've seen in the last year that we are putting more time into the parks maintenance than, and because of that, we're losing hours in the street department and sometimes in the utility departments, and those hours need to be paid back up. I don't know, Dave, if you want to elaborate on that at all.
Yeah, I don't know if you see that in January, I usually send out that job description of what everybody kind of does throughout the year. Well, it also breaks it down through departments. And just looking at in 2024, we're still not all the way in 2025, but in 2024, there was over 12,000 hours spent doing parks activities. And currently right now, we're funded for 4 employees in parks. That accounts for about 8,000 hours of work. So what that means is that 4,000 hours is either being done by a streets department funded or a utility operator. Actually, what it broke down to more about almost 400 hours of park jobs were being done by people in the utility department. So what we try to do is balance the hours out. So by having a parks position, you're infusing 2,000 more hours of manpower into that spot, which should absorb 2,000 hours, which should then put 2,000 hours back into other departments. It's not only that other departments are doing the work in parks, but it's also you're losing the services in those departments. Like if you should be, typical service should be grading roads every day. We're doing it maybe once every other week. And pothole patching, we're doing it once every couple weeks. You should be out there every day, so those hours that are going to parks actually be in streets. So what you're trying to do is fund positions. You're actually not hiring this specific person to do parks activities. You're hiring these 2,000 hours to account for more parks activities to be done. Along the way, you're not hiring that exact person to do a certain thing. You're hiring those hours to account for the hours that you're losing in that department. Actually, and hire that person in parks, you'll probably actually see increased service in streets. There, because somebody in the streets department will actually be able to go back and do what they're supposed to be doing in their department versus parks activity. You're not gonna go backwards in parks, but does that make sense what I'm kind of saying there? You're trying to balance hours out in each department to equal what your time you're spending in each department.
Is there, so it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like we're giving a lot of weight to parks to the detriment of our streets or utilities. Am I tracking you?
The most, should zoom in, it depends, I mean, just the count of between parks is by far the highest stress department, if you want. Most time is spent in parks activities, and it's, if I go back to 2015 and do this pie chart all the way through, you would consistently see parks continue to increase. But it doesn't really get backfunded with positions, it just keeps adding more things to do without really, I mean, really you should have 6 people in the parks department if they're doing 12,000 hours worth of work.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, is there an avenue to draw back or claw back some of the level of service in streets to, or not streets, but parks? I mean, I'm just trying to reconcile, like, we hired these people for these hours in these departments. You know, we're cheating in one area to accomplish, you know, something else in parks. And we know that the level of service is reduced then in streets because of the demand that parks has. I mean, are we aligning our level of service accordingly? I'm just trying to wrap my head around it.
I think majority of the things that I get asked by the council or by residents is parks-based. Pulling weeds, medians, you know, this park needs to be cut. It's youth, moms and dads saying this grass needs, I mean, it's now we're at that expectation that Fenway Field gets mowed twice a week and every park in the city gets mowed weekly and trash is cleared 3 times a week and all ball fields are dragged 2 to 3 times a week. You know, it's that expectation that as soon as you keep building it, you don't, unless we make an announcement and say, hey, we're not gonna do this anymore. I mean, that's kind of level of service that.
Thank you.
So can I just clarify something you just said there? Are you saying that medians in public spaces fall under parks?
Yes, that would be a park activity.
That's interesting. Any other questions on that particular, on that position? I believe I read somewhere that this is I'll get this wrong, step or level 3 as opposed to a starting position. And I think the question was asked at the workshop, is this hire going to have any specific knowledge to something that is park related or field turf management related? And the answer was no. So is there a reason why we are offering a higher wage for this position?
I was always taught when I proposed a person that you hired at a 3 because the worst case scenario you would hire it at 3. If you budget it as hiring at a step 1 and this person comes in with multiple licenses and a long background and you want to offer them a 3 to get them into this place, you're already over budget. So worst case scenario, you'd hit your budget. Best case scenario, you'd be under budget for that position. So every time I've put it in the budget for a position, I put it at a step 3 for that reason. Because we wouldn't hire anybody higher than that because it would be detrimental to your staff if you hired somebody at a 4 and somebody sitting right next to them has been there for 5 years and was getting. But really that's why it's in there. It doesn't say that I'm gonna hire somebody at a 3. I mean, over the last 5 hires, I've hired a 3, I've hired 2 1s, I've hired a 2. It all depends on what they bring to the table. The last hire we had in last month is a certified arborist, has a Class A license, has a whole bunch of licenses. They came in at a 3. If somebody comes in that has a Class B and let it run a shovel, they're going to be a step 1. So that's kind of, unless I get directed differently to hire that, that's why I've always put that number in, is you don't want to already be over budget when you start.
I was just gonna make the point, you know, if we're trying to shave money off the budget, you could certainly just direct that staff member be hired that be the hiring limitation, is that it can only be a step one hire. Just that sometimes you get a pool of candidates and you see a person, you go, boy, that person really fits what we're looking for, and you hate to lose that person that might have some experience as a lateral move from somewhere else or whatever to, because the budget isn't set up to accommodate that, so.
That's all good news. New news to me. I don't know about the rest of council, but that's good to know. That's the process. So you're looking for just direction as to?
General direction, I
like-
mean, you know, again, the 7.9 option, you know, that surplus is normally directed into the capital fund, and that's exactly what we would do here. It just, a little less of that would be realized in that fund, right? Because we'd be lowering the contribution from the general fund. And so next year, that general fund contribution would need to go up, maybe not as much because we've seeded that capital fund, but the sort of the two lines on the bottom there, rollback, and then the using surplus funds, the rollback will affect your next year's budget. It's a small rollback. I think it's a $50,000 rollback, but that puts you essentially $50,000 in the hole if you're trying to keep that number steady going into that fund. So I guess the long and short way of saying that is that this reduction will likely result in next year's projected budget increase being a little higher.
Yeah, I mean, I think the vision was, I mean, I think this year, we had a surplus and we bought down capital equipment fund on the 10-year plan. And I think the idea here is to cut that capital equipment fund, but then use the surplus to kind of buy it back up, right?
Yeah, I don't think it gets all the way there.
Yeah, there might be a delta, but
Right, there's a small delta, yeah.
yeah, I mean, you know, we've done a heck of a lot of work to get to below 8, where we started, and hopefully those who may come out in December to hear more about where we're at will appreciate the work that everybody in this room has done. So appreciate staff's hard work on it.
I agree. I think if, you know, presenting all this on the 8th for those, and I hope that as many people are able to can attend on the 8th to speak their mind on this, to present this and kind of show how we've backed this down, would be good to prove that we have really listened to the public and that we're go hard to try to get this as reasonable as possible and still keep services at a high level and bring on some positions that we're in need of. The city's been in need for years.
And I'll just make a comment, as I researched the property tax levies, preliminary tax levies throughout all the counties in Minnesota, and even in the cities. The average in the counties right now is 8.1 increase, and the average in the cities is 8.7 increase. So I'm really impressed with how we've whittled this down to from where we started to where we're at today. And I think this is a great piece, by the way.
So the intent would be then if the general consensus was that these options are all palatable to us, that we would bring that piece there for both the 12.59% sort of so people can see what the preliminary budget lays out, and then we would bring a piece like that shows the 7.9%. I believe that's the one, the scenario that you guys have in the packet there, so.
Correct.
And then throughout the presentation, we will also walk through where we started the year at, and then prior to actually getting into it, we will walk through, here's what we started at, and then here's where we're at, so that people then they can see that this wasn't just something that we're like, oh, here's what we're gonna do, and here's what we're moving forward with, but we will actually walk through. There'll be a lot of repeated information at that Truth and Taxation meeting, so I will apologize for that in advance. You'll see the same charts you've seen 47 times, but just so that then people can start to see that reoccurring document, and they can start to see the repeating changes that we were making to bring that down.
Great, I appreciate your work, Ally, on this and rest of staff, so thanks. Discussion item 9B, 2026 city meeting calendar. Jolene.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thanks to this not being an election year for us, we have a little bit more flexibility with looking at what our meeting schedule is going to look like for 2026. Generally, we would bring forward a recommendation for a meeting calendar adoption at our first meeting in January, but because we are not dealing with a change in council, we're going to have some stability. I would like to have some discussion about what we would like to do moving into 2026 for our meetings. If you recall, in July, we made an amendment to our meeting calendar. We changed our regular city council meeting times and our city council workshops to all be a 6 p.m. start. We also changed our planning commission to be a 6 p.m. start. And EDA meetings were moved from the first council meeting, the second Monday of the month preceding the council meeting to the first Monday of the month, so that they had their standalone day, so the EDA could have more time to work through meeting items. So I'm just looking for some council discussion and direction on where we'd like to go for 2026. If council's comfortable with keeping our meeting start times at 6 p.m. for those meeting groups. If council would like to consider moving all of our meetings to a 6 p.m. start time just for consistency across the board, or if council would prefer to move back to a 7 p.m. start time. I would vote no on that. Or we could start at 4 p.m. We could throw that out there too. So any questions for me? Otherwise, I'd like to hear your discussion, your thoughts on where we go for our 2026 meetings.
I really like the 6 o'clock start time.
Yep, me too.
I'm comfortable with it.
And I wouldn't mind seeing the EDA move to 6 o'clock as well, just for consistency.
I would agree on that. I don't know if the Parks Commission, if we would have to check with them to make sure that there was an issue, because they're the other one that's at 5:30, are they?
They are. I'm happy to do a poll with those meeting groups, and then to bring that recommendation to the council. I do know that there have been a couple occasions with the Parks group where members have said, oh, I thought we started at 6. So they showed up late or didn't make the meeting at all. So I think having these staggered start times has led to a little bit of confusion with meeting groups, and generally consistency is key, so.
Currently, is the Airport Commission, is that at 6 o'clock?
It is at 6 o'clock.
I'm not sure if we can necessarily dictate the EDA's time, or if they would need to decide that themselves. Certainly we could, the chair could probably bring that forward.
Yeah, we can bring that up on next Monday night.
Oh, I think that makes sense if the commissions are agreeable, for the most part. I think it makes sense to do everything at 6 o'clock. We've got a closed session yet tonight, so if this was at 7 o'clock, we'd be a whole nother hour later, and so I think the 6 o'clock move has been beneficial for council and staff.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we will move into staff updates, and we'll start with Ellie.
The only update I have is that on December 8th, we will have our Truth and Taxation meeting. All of my contact information is available on the website. Feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions prior to that, or if you have anything else you'd like to add. Feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Ryan?
Mayor, City Council, no updates unless you have any questions.
Ryan, do you want to just update people on Eureka, where we're at with that project?
Yep. So you might have seen some equipment stored out there or dropped off today. They're waiting on some correspondence from the geotechnical sub-consultant, and once we know a real schedule, we'll then get some message boards set up and let the public know when we will be starting that. The decision has been made that they're going to allow them to place a surcharge with road closures in place so they can go faster, but they'll reopen it each night. So we've already coordinated and communicated that with the City of Columbus and some members here in the city. So, but more information to come on that when that actual start date will occur.
those road closures would just be for about, what did they say, maybe 2.5 weeks worth of work. Again, kind of a 9 to 4 type of closure and reopening it each evening so traffic can get through at night.
Not to mention, my understanding is some savings without having to have flaggers there, so some financial gains, savings as well.
That has been the conversation as well.
Jolene?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On your consent agenda this evening, you approve the hire of our new deputy city clerk, and he happens to be in our audience tonight. I'm hoping we didn't scare him off. So this is Kyle. We're excited to bring him on board. He'll be coming on board on December 9th, so we'll be seeing more of him as we go forward. Secondly, City Hall is going to be closed Thursday and Friday in observance of the Thanksgiving holiday. So just be aware of that. Staff will be hopefully enjoying time with their family and friends during those days. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you, to the community. I did post some information about the Eureka project on our website and our Facebook page. It has gotten quite the attention. But I would encourage folks to go ahead and sign up for updates on that project. Bolton and Mink has their project page up, and they do great work at keeping folks updated on what's going on. So there's a link to the project page on our website, so folks can go there and sign up for that.
Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you.
Abby?
I just want to let you know that the county has approved the local affordable housing agreement that you passed a little over a month ago or so. So that will, that's the trigger for us to start working to transfer our local affordable housing dollars to them for their management. And as a reminder, a big portion of what we really want to aim to do with those is the preservation of our local affordable housing stock. So fortunately, those don't count for our affordable housing allocation. Those are always new units, but it's still something I think for existing homeowners is an opportunity for investment in their properties. I also have been talking with the county and the Met Council and Community Thread. We're going to have another kind of roundtable transportation meeting after the new year to talk about ongoing operations. One of the things that's really exciting, though, is the county is going to be dedicating some funds to expansion of our circulator program in the community, and that we should be seeing that coming forward after the new year as well. And then I also just want to extend my thanks actually to the council for supporting the community development department this year because I don't think we could do it without more people. And I know that there's a lot of work to do, and I'm really excited with the team that we've got on board. So thank you very much.
Dave?
Bridge lights were turned on today, along with snowflakes and the Christmas trees, or the evergreen trees in the roundabout. So if you're going that way, you'll see them up tonight. Hometown holiday is December 5th. We won't meet again until then. I believe Kyle sent out some information to the council. That begins, I believe, at 4 o'clock and goes, tree lightings right before 7. And I was just watching the computer, and we just got in our first winter weather advisory for tomorrow night. So the time is here. So just want to tell everybody to drive safe. Just because you took the road yesterday at 85 doesn't mean you can probably take it Wednesday morning at 85. All the updates I have.
Chief Peterson?
Hopefully nobody's going 85 miles an hour, but Mayor and City Council members, no updates from Captain Hanegraaff or myself.
Amanda, anything?
Yeah, Council, I just have one that I thought you might like to know. So if you recall, you earlier this year passed ordinance regarding Bitcoin kiosks, largely due to the work of Detective Nathan Olstad. And the beginning of this month, a woman was coerced to remove $17,000 from her bank account. She attempted to deposit the money at the Bitcoin kiosks that did not exist in the city because of what you passed. And so eventually she got frustrated, realized that maybe she was being scammed, went back to her bank, deposited the $17,000 back into her bank, and then went to the police department, I believe the very next morning, realizing something wasn't right, wanting to talk to somebody. So on behalf of your community, thank you for passing that ordinance. It obviously made the difference in at least this woman's life. So there you go.
Just a quick question on that. How many, so if I remember correctly, they got, I don't know, in violation of whatever, then they was taken away. Have we removed any?
Yeah, we removed
since?
all of them.
So none. there's
So
none in the
everybody either couldn't become a licensed operator because they had massive amounts of fraud, or ultimately decided that the cost or the administration was not something they wanted to monkey with. And so either through one of those two ways, all 4 kiosks have been removed in the city.
Great. We handle it without being heavy-handed and let them make that decision. So thank you for Nate's work on that and your work.
Yeah.
So. Mark?
I can't top that one. That was a pretty good one. We do have the Airport Commission meeting on December 3rd, 6 o'clock, right here. And number of agenda items, including the grant that MnDOT made us aware that we're in line for now to extend the taxiway and runway. So a big item to discuss there. So aside from that, I think that's all the updates I have.
Councilmember Miller.
2 things. Dave, I would like to say, as I drove through town today, I'll look even better tonight, so thank you for all your hard work. The city already looks really nice for the holidays coming up. Second one would be the school board update. Some of you have probably heard that one of the school board members has resigned. There's been a lot of controversy. They're trying to appoint a replacement. They've now divided into 2 committees, and on December 3rd, they'll go and appoint 2 more potential people to be on the school board, and hopefully by either the 3rd or the 4th, they'll have the new school board member appointed if they can agree.
Councilmember Valento.
Just a happy Thanksgiving to everyone, and I appreciate everyone's hard work on the budget and everything you do for the city. That's it.
Councilmember Erickson.
Yeah, I noticed the lights when I came from my office tonight, and they look great, so thank you for that, and no further updates.
Member Larson.
If nothing further, thank you.
I don't have anything either, other than just to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. So we are going to, someone needs to make a motion to go into closed session.
I move to close the meeting pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D03, Subdivision 1B, for the purpose of labor negotiation strategy. The closed session will be held in the Forest Lake Conference Room and will commence immediately. Once the closed session is completed, the City Council will reconvene the regular meeting in council chambers, and as there are no other items on the agenda, we'll adjourn the meeting.
The motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're in closed session.